Hey everybody, today I'm down in Southern California and we have finally been able to take a look at the biggest news Toyota has released in, well, decades, because that's almost how long the old 4Runner has been around. This is the all-new 4Runner, and Travis and I have been able to get hands-on with 3 different 4Runners actually. This is the limited trim. We also have the new Trail Hunter trim over there, and we're going to take a look at the TRD Pro in just a moment. So Travis, what do you think of the front end design?
Well, I think it has the same basic boxy shape, but with a little more sculpting. Honestly, I really enjoy it. And with the 3 different flavors that we have today and the rest of the trims, there are a lot of different ways you can get your 4Runner.
Yeah, and the 4Runner has been so popular. This has become one of America's best-selling vehicles of any description, and that's kind of why we have so much variation available in the lineup now. The limited trim is obviously the more luxurious version. We have the chrome bar up there, LED fog lights below. The design of the fog lights does change trim to trim, and the TRD Pro is going to have a light bar up front if you want one. But I kind of like it. It's a little bit of 4Runner, a little bit of Tacoma, the current generation Tacoma, a bit of the old 4Runner, and like just a hint of maybe RAV4 in there somewhere.
And with the limited, we're getting some chrome. We have a nice paint. It's a very different feel than what we have, at least the other ones to look at today. Each of these is going to feel like its own, and I think they're going to fit the different personalities and the different buyer who's looking for their 4Runner their way.
Yeah, let's get to some of the details and some of the specifications. So obviously little air curtain inlets there to help improve aerodynamic efficiency. Coming around to the side, you'll notice we have unique wheels, definitely in keeping with the limited theme of this model. Power running boards are going to be available. If I pop the door open, you can see those power running boards functioning there. Also rock rails depending on the model. And yes, there is indeed going to be a 3rd row available. That means that a lot of the predictions actually on the new 2025 4Runner were just flatly wrong, because a lot of folks had assumed it would be shrinking dimensionally. Turns out it's actually about the same size as the outgoing 4Runner, and almost exactly the same size as the Land Cruiser 250, which is the only model we're getting in the United States. There are some differences, however. This is going to get the power rear glass, which we're going to show you in just a moment. So the glass goes down rather than flips up like we get in the Land Cruiser. There's an available 3rd row, which you can't get in the Land Cruiser, but you will be able to get the hybrid system in the Land Cruiser optionally in your 4Runner.
In terms of the rest of the rear end design, again, familiar but a little bit different. And to me, it seems a little more sculpted. We do still have the spoiler here that's going to close out the rest of the shape. We are missing the rear wiper blade, but that is because this rolls down, and that is a sacrifice a lot of people will take, especially in their 4Runner. The rest of the emblem here spelled out as Toyota, 4Runner down below. Again, a little bit different layout than we're used to, but nice, big, boxy, and I think overall appreciated. The lights themselves split up here, not into totally different sections, but mostly on colors. So we have our red accents on the outside here, and your turn signals, and likely your reverse lights in there as well. With the limited trim, we have the chrome bumper. I do think it fits this particular trim and this particular color very well. And plenty of room when we do open this up for that 3rd row optional. If we have that up, it'll be easier to access it to and from, closing up and down. And we can get to our stuff, which is what you want to do in your 4Runner, is load it up and take it wherever you want to go.
Rear windows that open, regardless of how they open, are becoming rarer and rarer in modern SUVs, and I love the fact that Toyota has kept this, because it means it's a lot more cargo practical. Whether you want a surfboard hanging out of the back, or a ladder, or you're just going to Home Depot for something random that's just a little bit too long for your vehicle, this is a whole lot easier than trying to deal with a hatch that you then have to rope down there to your hitch receiver. This just makes a lot more sense. The most earth-shattering change probably happens under the hood, where we find not an old V6 engine and an old 5-speed automatic, but Toyota's latest rear-wheel drive system. 2.4-liter turbo shared with the Tacoma, 8-speed automatic transmission producing 278 horsepower. One common complaint about 4Runners in the past, especially now that sales have practically exceeded 250,000 a year, pretty much every year, is that the fuel economy is not as high as maybe some people had wanted, or the power level wasn't as high as some people wanted, and that is where the new hybrid system comes in. This is shared with the new Land Cruiser and the new Tacoma as well, 326 horsepower and over 400 pound-feet of torque. But this is not exactly an efficiency-focused hybrid system. That's not how I would describe it at any rate. This is more of a performance and capability-oriented hybrid system with a little bit of additional fuel economy improvement. We have a 48 horsepower electric motor. It's mounted between the engine and the transmission, so it has a very, very limited electric range. Mainly it's here to help you get extra power, and it still has a torque converter, so it's still going to be pretty smooth. Now let's talk about cargo capacity. It's pretty much the same as the outgoing 4Runner, and a lot of the features back here are the same. For instance, the power window can be powered with the buttons right here on the tailgate. That's a really nice touch. And then of course we have the power hatch back here as well. Now this is the hybrid model we're taking a look at now. So we do see a slight reduction in cargo capacity. It's basically that much of a reduction in cargo capacity because that's where the battery is living, right back there. Now don't worry, it doesn't take up any space for the spare tire. The spare tire is low mounted underneath the vehicle. Of course, this is also where the optional third row seats would go. The third row is not going to be available with the hybrid as you'd logically expect because that's where the battery pack is located. But it does mean that shoppers have a lot of decisions to make, honestly, in the combined Toyota and Lexus portfolio, because this is also closely related to the Lexus GX, which does have an optional third row, and of course has a Lexus logo. A common complaint about the previous generation 4Runner was that the seats weren't as comfortable as people would like, and the interior was just not as refined as a modern Toyota. Logical complaints, and a lot of that has been addressed with this model. I haven't spent a great deal of time in these seats, but I can definitely tell you on initial impressions, they're significantly more comfortable than the outgoing model. So Travis, how's that back seat?
Well, even sitting behind you, Alex, here, I do have plenty of room. This seat is reclined. It is a dual stage recline. This one's a little bit more upright. I've got a center armrest here. I've got USB charging, dual vents, and a power outlet. So as far as the space back here, it is pretty good. And because it's so boxy, I have headroom, and there are a lot of vehicles that I don't.
You know, one thing I noticed, no panoramic moonroof. That does help out your rear seat headroom, but does mean you don't have a glass panel back there.
It does, and even though I'm a little bit close here, it isn't feeling horrendously claustrophobic because I do have a pretty good sight line going out, so overall, pretty good. Now, as I mentioned, these seats are dual recline, so this is completely vertical. If we fold them all the way back, it goes quite a ways back, and you do get quite a bit more headroom. But when it comes to mass storage capacity, which is one of this car's strong points, you can fold them all the way down and flip forward, and you get a lot of room back here. And this is likely the same seating configuration you'll see in the third row, so that would be your access to the third row. More of an emergency situation, but nicer to have than not.
Yep, and let me let's do a little experiment here, Travis. Let's see how this would be on the third row. Obviously, you can't leave a child seat latch anchored into place, but I'm going to go ahead and guesstimate that the third row is going to be somewhere around here. Well, let's keep that down because we have cup holders in the back, so you can approximately tell where the third row seat is going to be positioned. I don't know how high off the ground it's going to be, so, you know, keep those headroom expectations in check. As we take a look around the interior, keep in mind this is an early pre-production model, so not all the plastics or textures are production accurate. Down here we have the controls for the driver's seat. We do have 4-way adjustable lumbar support, hallelujah, right there for the driver. You can see in this limited trim we have sort of a baseball sort of brown color for the, or say baseball glove brown here. The limited trim also has unique accents on the seat backs, and we see a bit of differentiation obviously through the trim line as you'd expect. Moving over to the front passenger seat, we have a strong shoulder design to this seat, very similar to what we find in some of the Tacoma models as well. More aggressive bolstering than we found in the previous generation right there. These seats are of course both heated and ventilated. And then we find more premium materials on the front doors. Again, not all the textures here are final. So we find stitched materials in the upper section of the door, stitched imitation leather there in the middle, and then a soft touch armrest right there. Some storage with sort of a plastic netting design right there. That is not actually netting, it's actually just plastic. And then we find a large storage bin down there at the bottom of the door. The dashboard design is similar to what we find in the Tacoma, and that is a nice change because we get a big storage area there on top of the dashboard, differing trim depending on the different model we're looking at. This one has kind of a sort of a knurled texture to it right there. Big glove box below that, sort of a combination slot and bin style glove compartment. I suspect you'd have no problem fitting a tablet computer inside. And speaking of tablet computers, we have a huge screen right here in the middle of the dashboard. This is running the latest Toyota infotainment software, so of course your smartphone is going to take over practically the entire screen when you're in the smartphone mode. I love this software because of its simplicity, but it's not quite as feature-rich as some. Moving down from there, we find 2 big air vents. Lots of physical controls for things like the climate control system right there. The center console design is very similar to the Tacoma, so we find a Qi wireless charging mat right there. No wireless charging mat on that side, but we do find 2 USB-C ports that output a ton of power. Over 50 watts combined, 45 watts when you're just using one of those ports. That's a really nice touch. And then we find a little bit of storage there. You can put tablets or smartphones, things like that. Pretty typical shifter there. You can see this one has full-time four-wheel drive. And you'll notice that instead of a separate lock button for the center differential, we just have the full-time versus part-time mode right there. That's how we differentiate those two modes from one another. Bank of buttons back there, big cup holders and squishy center armrest. And then of course on this side, we do have a full LCD instrument cluster in this particular trim. The steering wheel, it's a pretty similar design to other Toyota truck models. Over on the right side of the steering wheel, we have the adaptive cruise control buttons. And then on the left side, we have some infotainment buttons and the buttons to control that multifunction LCD cluster. A touch that we've seen in some other models, we have a removable JBL speaker acting as the center channel in the vehicle. So that docks right there, it charges, and then it acts as the center channel for the optional audio system as well as a portable travel speaker. Moving over to the Trailhunter model, we get unique Trailhunter floor mats with the Trailhunter and 4Runner logo, and the same unique interior touches that we find in the Tacoma Trailhunter with this really cool dashboard trim here. This reminds me of, I don't know, 1990s Formica countertops, but I actually really like the look. I'm not saying that in a negative way. This is actually the trim that I would most want in my 4Runner just because it looks so different. The Toyota logo on the dashboard, it's underwritten in yellow, and we get the yellow accent stitching on this sort of wet cement colored leather upholstery. We then have those wet cement colored touches over there on the front doors, Trailhunter logo with a bit more of that trim. And you guessed it, gold accents and gold stitching on the seats, but we don't get any sort of treatment like we find in the TRD Pro to the perforated center of the seat. There are a number of different four-wheel drive systems available, but the one that we find in this Trailhunter model is more similar to the TRD Pro, so it's a part-time four-wheel drive system. You can tell by the options up here since we have a 2-high mode, and then we have a rear locker and a stabilizer bar disconnect option. The LCD instrument cluster, that is essentially the same, but because this is the hybrid, we do have a little battery gauge right over there. And then on the driver's side, we have some auxiliary switches like we find in the Tacoma, 4 of them right there below the power hatch. They also brought along a TRD Pro, which is going to be the pinnacle of Toyota off-roading capability in the 4Runner. Let's talk about some of the changes for this model. Now, for this generation, there's also going to be a Trailhunter version because Toyota's focusing on 2 different kinds of off-roading, more traditional off-roading and also overlanding. So if you come in close, you can see the details on this front end. We get a different grille treatment, Toyota spelled out nice and large, and of course, a light bar integrated at the bottom of the bumper. It's in a different location than on the Tacoma, but we get a very similar design with the LED fog lights down here, the LED light bar right there, and surprisingly a little bit of gloss black plastic on the lower bumper. I'm a bit surprised by that, of course, because gloss black plastic is going to show scratches a bit more easily than matte plastic, but this is also something that we saw in the Tacoma in the new TRD Pro version of that. Coming around the side, obviously, we have big all-terrain tires on this model. We get a 2-inch lift up front, just under 2 inches in the back, and unique suspension components. If you come in real close here, you'll notice the different suspension arms there, TRD labeled in nice red color so that you can tell what's going on there. We also, of course, get rock rails on this particular model. You can see the TRD rock rails down there. Moving around to the back, black door handles right there. This is kind of a unique color. It's sort of wet cement, I guess you could say, in terms of its color profile. Lots more black accents around the back, including back here on the rear bumper. Again, keep in mind this is probably going to scratch up a little bit more easily than some, and the full-size spare tire is tucked up nice and tight right there under the rear. Now logically, in many ways, the 4Runner continues to be a Tacoma SUV, depending on how you want to look at that, but they didn't want them to look identical, one with a bed and one with a box in the back, so we have a very different front end design here to help differentiate things a bit more. It's also very closely related, of course, to the new Land Cruiser 250. This is the only Land Cruiser we're getting in North America, but it definitely has a very different vibe externally. Exactly which one is going to be better off-road? You know, that's kind of a hard thing to say at the moment because there is so much in common between these two. They're almost exactly the same length, they have the same wheelbase, they even share drivetrains depending on the version you get. The hybrid system that's standard in the Land Cruiser is going to be optional in the 4Runner, but this does give you more choice as far as styling than you've ever had before. You no longer have to get something bigger if you want Land Cruiser styling. Now you just choose how big you want, whether you want the Sequoia or you want the Land Cruiser or the 4Runner. They're about the same size. You decide, do you want the third row, which is going to be available in the 4Runner, not available in the Land Cruiser, and whether you want round headlights or the really slim headlights available in the Land Cruiser, or more of a traditional Toyota truck look over here. Logically, the Trailhunter and the TRD Pro also get the hybrid system standard. This is going to be available in other trims of the 4Runner, but here it becomes standard because you want the extra power and especially the extra torque when off-roading. 326 horsepower, over 400 pound-feet of torque thanks to the electric motor that's coupled between the engine and the transmission. But much like we see in the Land Cruiser hybrid and of course the Tacoma hybrid, this hybrid system is a lot smoother than many single motor hybrids out there because it still has a torque converter. So the power flows basically from engine to a clutch pack to the motor to the torque converter and then to the 8-speed automatic transmission behind. That means that the motor can effectively be removed from the equation whenever the vehicle wants to, and it's going to feel exactly like a regular 4-cylinder turbo out on the trail. Logically, on the inside, we see some TRD Pro changes as well. The Toyota logo over here on the dashboard has red accents under the letters and red accents everywhere in this interior, for instance, around the glove box right there in the dashboard. We then have the TRD Pro logo over here on the front doors, more red accent stitching right there. This has the part-time 4-wheel drive system, so there's no center differential to lock or unlock. We have 4 low, 4 high, and 2 high, so the center transfer case is just locked in 4 high and 4 low. Then down here we have a rear differential locker, sway bar disconnect right there. But you'll notice we still don't have a front locker in the TRD Pro. That's kind of the one thing I had really hoped that Toyota would bring along for something like this. We then get the red accent on the steering wheel and then the TRD logo down there at the bottom. The upholstery in the TRD Pro has a unique trick up its sleeve. You can see that the camo pattern is actually underneath the perforations in the seat. So if you're viewing this from an angle like this, you actually can't see the camo pattern at all because all you're seeing is the leather upholstery on top. And then as you start looking at it more straight on, that camo pattern becomes really obvious. It's a really neat, really cool touch there. Also a cool touch, the red interior is still available in the TRD Pro. The camo pattern is going to be a little bit more noticeable with that interior color just because of the color differences there, but the rest of the rear seat area is essentially the same as the other 4Runners we looked at, really just with the red accenting going on the seats. Now at this point in time, I don't have any pricing information for the new 4Runner, but you can bet it's probably going to start around where the old model left off, so low $40,000 range. Clearly, the limited trim is going to be one of the upper end trims, but the more expensive trims are probably going to be the Trailhunter and TRD Pro, the more off-road oriented and overland oriented trims available. I really like the look of this Trailhunter, I have to say. It is off-roady, but in a different sort of way to the TRD Pro. We get a lot of the same front end touches. So the same light bar, the same fog lights up front, but different colors and different styling elements all around the vehicle. And I'm just kind of partial to the sort of wet cement colored leather upholstery that we have in this model, and of course the yellow accents inside. I just think those go really, really well with the Trailhunter, something that we also see in the new Tacoma lineup. Yeah, I don't know, what do you think about the gold wheels? I'm getting lots of 1980s flashbacks with every manufacturer that's bringing the gold wheels onto their new vehicles. But one other thing that I noticed that I really like about the Trailhunter over the TRD Pro is we don't get the glossy black accents, which I would just scratch the snot out of on a trail. Obviously these are still going to get scratched, but matte black shows scratches a little bit less. And then of course, if you're really not worried about it at all, you can get all the body color bits over there on that Limited.
Yeah, I definitely like the matte. I do also like the gold wheels, so even if I found one that was a perfect combo, didn't have them, I'd throw them on there later. The accessory catalog is going to be quite large for all of them. I think this is a great step forward for 4Runner.
Yeah, part of me is a little bit sad that we don't get, some cool touches that I think Toyota could have done, like, a T-top roof could have been hilarious. That would have been really epic. We don't get removable doors as some people had sort of hoped. But I think they've been faithful to the 4Runner faithful that have continued to buy the 4Runner in absolutely incredible numbers because this is exactly what they have wanted, and they refined it, they sharpened the edges, they gave it better efficiency, they gave it more power, etc., but they didn't take away the core of what the 4Runner is. And logically, if they had changed it into a Wrangler competitor, it would have changed intrinsically what the 4Runner really is.
Quite a bit.
Yeah, and I do also appreciate the fact that this is one of the few vehicles in this segment that has a full-time all-wheel drive system. A true torque and center differential is something that we just don't find in most of the competition. You certainly won't find it in a Wrangler or a Bronco. So if you're looking for all-wheel drive capability, four-wheel drive capability for, say, going to a ski resort, this is the way that I would go because it's going to feel much more sure-footed than those part-time systems.
It feels a little bit more grown up from the last generation, but not more sedate, not less interesting. I think it's both grown up and improved just about in every category.
So there you have it. This is the new 4Runner. If you want to know all the details, stay tuned because hopefully we'll be driving one of these soon. We should know pricing closer to when it goes on sale. So hit that subscribe button down there if you haven't already done so. Find us at all the social places, the Twitters, the Instagrams, the threads, and the things that I've also forgotten, and we'll see all of you next week.